Well, welcome back to OTXNT. I'm Dr. Andrew Marquez, joined by
Dr. Ben Pate.
And today we're talking about an exciting continuation on the theme of celebrations and some special celebration days. The topic of today's show is on Lent and the period of time fasting before Easter. Is this something that evangelical Christians, Baptists should do? Many are doing it. Do we even know what we're doing? So that's kind of the theme today. And before we get too deep into it, you ready to open in prayer?
Do it, man.
All right, let's join me with the Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. All
so
right.
Lent, have you ever done Lent?
Look, man, I think in college it was kind of one of the first times. I mean, I probably came across it, especially growing up overseas, where the majority of people that I probably knew were Catholic or what. But I think really, I didn't really hear much about it until probably high school, college. People talking about giving up stuff. So that's about it. So hold on real quick, though. Okay, from our frame of reference right now. And now, if you're watching this whenever, it's not going to help you. But right now, at our date, when does Lent officially start?
Well, that's the question. Are you in the East or the West? But for most people,
we're living in the West. We're going by the Western calendar, not the Orthodox calendar.
Yes, it is starting this coming Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is the 17th of February. And so, yes, you have time, about 6 days to prep yourself if you want to partake in Lent this year.
Okay. Well, very cool.
And the question then is, what is it? Should we do it? And is there, at what level do you enter into it? Because you can do it old school style, which is really tough, or you can do it kind of as a take it and leave it, and maybe just give up cupcakes.
That's the thing, man. It's like every time we get into Lent, I guess a Baptist, and this is why I know you and I, the way we've done these episodes going forward, like kind of this is your area you looked up a little bit. But like when I think of Lent, most people I know are like, I'm doing social media. I'm giving up Coke. I'm going to give up ice cream or desserts or sugar. Okay, but so kind of give me, if you will, like, where does it come from? Why do it? And is it, I mean, even just what you just said. So it seems like the Catholic world and the Orthodox world both do this. And so where does it come from, though?
Well, and from everything I've looked at, and, I'm being a Baptist, I don't claim to be an expert on Lent. But, I've done a little research to try to just get ready for this. There's some stuff going on that Lent is some sort of paganized holiday that was overtaken by the Christians. And I don't really see that as compelling. What we have is a progression over time of trying to celebrate and prepare for Easter. Of course, Pascha, I think the Eastern Church hates the name Easter because that is reference sometimes to oyster or a pagan goddess. Generally, though, Lent is a period of time before Resurrection Day where we do a fasting and essentially penance, if you want to use Catholic terminology, to prepare ourselves. It's a preparation time to really celebrate Easter. And generally, I did a discussion kind of on my devotions about the Nativity Feast and Advent and how that's a very similar thing. It's a smaller period of time, but Advent is a preparation time for Christmas. And the same thing, but even longer, it's the Great Lenten Fast is the season of Lent. And it usually is 40 days. And how you celebrate those 40 days is different, but more or less 40 days is what developed into the current practice.
And, so you said, so the idea is that we're just in the mindset getting ready for Easter, right? So the idea is that we would spend time building up toward in the same way that we do Advent. So Lent is kind of like an Advent is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, for those of us that grew up in an evangelical world or Baptist world where we didn't even do Advent, and Advent kind of is this new thing that everybody's doing. the reasoning that we bring into the evangelical mindset of Advent is the same thing you would do for Lent. Now, the Nativity Feast and Advent, I believe early on, were not compelled feasts. I could be a little bit wrong on this, but rather more of a free will, where Lent actually became so significant that it was a mortal sin in some cases to not follow through with your Lenten obligation. So it's a little more serious. It might have, I believe it is a little more ancient, but it seems to develop with an idea of, I think there's a quote from some of the second century fathers about giving up, some give a day, a couple of days, or a 40. And that idea, or it's either 40 minutes or 40 days. I need to get the quote, but there's plenty of YouTubers out there that have covered this a little bit differently, but usually they're Catholic. So it's developing, and it's not uniform everywhere until 3rd or 4th century. What we find, I think Athanasius has a letter referring to Lent, and there's discussion in Egypt about the need to increase our fasting period because we're the laughingstock of Christendom. Everybody else is fasting and we're not. So it began to kind of take, it expanded, it grew, it became more uniform. And by the time you're in the 4th century, it seems to be pretty standard that there is this Lenten fast before Easter.
So, I mean, here's part of this. I think that before we really dive into more of the Lent stuff, I think what we need to do is make a note to do another one on just fasting in general, because that's a whole nother lost practice in, I think, at least in our world, right? And because let's face it, if you ever read Babylon Bee, you'll see the Baptist jokes, and they're generally true, right? Our love for potlucks and food is, we are a very food-driven feasting that COVID changed some of that too. But I mean, that's not something we really think about is giving up. And then also with that, of people thinking about, what we generally think of fasting is total abstaining from everything. And that's not necessarily even what a fast is for. I mean, so you and I have some time to teach on this. I think it'll be an interesting topic to talk about what some of the fasts were and all of that. But let's talk about then Lent. So Lent was, I mean, it's one thing I like about it, right, is it's building in 40 days into your year of some sort of a fast. And these are obviously partial fasts, because a full-blown 40, I mean, that's a pretty tough. Now, granted, when you said that was how they started, did they start as a full-blown fast, or how did they start?
No, so pretty much as it develops from what I've seen, you have a statement made, I believe it's Gregory the Great. We're getting some more standardization. I think Aquinas mentions this, which of course is a lot later than Gregory. But the idea is, and this was framed, I like this, so it's worth sharing. In the East, in Latin, this is called the Quadragesima. And my Latin may be bad, but the idea is it's 40 days. So just as Pentecost is 50 days, this is the 40 days prior. And it is called Lent in English because it's the lengthening of days. And so as we have moved past spring and the days are getting longer, that's the definition of the season is more about the days getting longer, okay? Just as Advent, the days are getting shorter. So that is the general reason we got the name. It's not that significant of a name, but Gregory the Great said, to Easter Day, there are 6 weeks or 42 days from which the 6 Sundays are subtracted from the fast, leaving 36 days of fasting. Now, there are 365 days in a year, so we are, so to speak, giving a tenth of our year to God. And so it is a tithe of fasting. And I really like that because I'm big on tithing. And so we talk about tithing resources. How about your time? And we sometimes talk about, serving in different capacities, but this was an idea of some sort of preparation, penitential act of checking my body, my worldly desires for 40 days. And so again, they aren't fasting on Sundays. In the Eastern Church, they do it for 8 weeks and they have Saturday and Sunday off. Now, that means that the fasting is not held on Saturday or Sunday in the East. It's not held on Sundays in the West, but you still are giving up certain things the whole time. And so this is the different levels that you can enter at. Okay, so if you are Catholic and you're old school, you don't eat meat on Friday ever.
Got it.
So if you go usually to a restaurant and you get soup on Friday, it's clam chowder. And that it goes back to an old practice of we don't eat meat except for fish on Friday. So that idea is extended. And the old Lenten fast was you don't eat any meat or any dairy or animal products, eggs included, for the entire period.
Huh.
And then the development of when can I eat in the day was at the ninth hour of the day, you can begin eating. And so it is not necessarily the Ramadan fast, right? But it's similar that we don't eat from midnight all the way until the ninth hour because that's when Jesus passed. And you can begin eating after 3 p.m. And so
you're eating from between midnight and 9, you don't eat. And then you eat from pretty much, you're saying 9 a.m.
Sorry, 3 p.m., the ninth hour. So 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Okay. So you're not eating, you can eat after 3 p.m. and that would be, but as long as it's not beef or meat or animal products.
Right.
Okay.
And if you were one of the guys running out there in the desert monastics, you would actually have a dry meal. So you would actually only eat like nuts and raisins for the entire time. That's the super hardcore way. I don't think anyone's really doing that anymore. Part of the reason also the eggs show up on Easter is you've just gone 40 days without an egg. So there's a lot of discussion about eggs and Easter and this cult. There's also a recognition that it was a big celebration day. And the East still does this right. They cook a lamb. They have a big old feast on Easter. And it's about the lamb and it's about the eggs. And it's because we've given this up. And the big celebration then is having this back in our life.
Huh.
So now that's old school Lent. And the first period that we see this lifted a little bit is in the Crusades, that I think the Pope gave a pass on the eggs and oil to those fighting in the war. But they had been fighting in the war and following the old school Lent. So it used to be pretty strong. After Leo the 13th, they let up a little bit on the dairy and eggs and lard. And a lot of people believe that has to do something with the working conditions of the industrial era and how people are working really hard in tough conditions. And so they lightened it up. They just said no meat. And today there's almost no restriction required, but you can abstain from meat Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then choose something to give up for 40 days. So it's very loose today by old standards. And I got to be honest, for me, as somebody who's never done this, I'm just kind of like, let's do it hardcore or nothing at all. Like I'm less attracted, right? I don't know.
So if I'm hearing you right, so the old school way is you go Monday through Friday and you're fasting and you're only eating between 3 and midnight or 3 and 11:59. And then Sunday or Saturday and Sunday, you're free to eat anytime throughout the day.
That's in the East. In the West, it's just Sunday.
Okay. And Sunday, it's just in the West, you just do Sunday. And then but throughout that time, you're whatever you're abstaining from, you abstain from throughout the 40 days. So you don't break that fast on the Sunday. It's not like I bring meat back in and I'm doing meatless for 6 days. I'm doing no meat throughout the 40 days, but Sunday is the day I can eat whenever I want to during that time.
Correct.
I like that though. I mean, I go back to, I think, the tithe piece, which I think is intriguing to me, of your time and even that. So, yeah.
Well, so, it's interesting. It definitely became legalistic. Again, it got to a point where in the empire, if you broke this, you need to go see a priest and confess because you're going to hell. I mean, it became significant. And, that goes against the Baptist mindset, right? We're not legalistic in that sense. We don't think that our salvation can be lost. And I will say that some of the concerns about Lent have been what it produced. And many people know what Fat Tuesday is if they don't know what Ash Wednesday is. But you're going to go down to Mardi Gras and have a big party and participate in all kinds of evil because we got to fast tomorrow. That is the development of Mardi Gras. And so for the Puritan mindset coming out of the Reformation, it was, every day is God's day. And what we're doing by creating specific times that are God's is kind of designating times that aren't God's. And that's how the local perception was. And so I think something is lost by not designating specific times of celebration and fasting. But we bringing those back, if you decide to, we don't want to tie legalistic things to it. And we have to recognize I'm doing something special here, not so I can be more evil at a different time in my life.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, here's the deal. I think the purpose of fasting, though, is to drive my attention towards the Lord, for specifically also prayer, right? So I guess if you're going to do a 40-day fast, there needs to be a reason of, like, I think what happens if you do Lent, you need to go into it, I think, with the understanding of my fast is for what? And I think you need to say, well, then I'm going to do these days so that I might draw closer to the Lord, seek him. I might pray when I have those desires for that. I think if for just giving up something for the sake of giving up, that's where I think it becomes, in my opinion, worthless. Why give up? For what purpose do you want? I mean, because what happens too, I think too, is when we start talking about fast, it becomes very quickly to just turn it into a quick weight loss, Christian
Absolutely.
weight loss program, right?
And I've thought about, I've thought about that exact thing. Like, how would I, sell this, essentially let people know, like, this is worth trying. And really, one of the things that everybody loves is the Daniel diet. And you hear a lot of ladies, especially in January, we're going to go on the Daniel diet. And really that's what this is. It's, now the East calls their pre-Advent time the Nativity Feast. But the idea is pretending we're back in the garden and all we're eating is what Adam and Eve would have eaten. And so it's that very
that's similar. A debate. We should have that sometime. Were they eating animals or not? Or at least were other animals, depending if you're old Earth, man, they're eating each other. So
yeah,
that'll be a fun one. We should get an old and young Earth people to come sit and talk with us. So, I mean, but yeah, I think that's interesting. That's another thing. You and I should talk Daniel diet at some point. Because there's two major kind of Daniel diets, right? You got the first one that we talk about with the vegetables and water only. And then you get into chapter 10, which talks about, I didn't put oil on my body and I abstained from wine and, what does he say? Fancy, not fancy, that's not the word, but, fancy foods of some sort. So there's kind of two pieces to that one. And I think that's an interesting book for how to do fasting. But yeah, I think the point, one thing I do like about this, right, is that it does regain building something back into your year. The problem is people will always swing towards legalism once you start doing something. I mean, you and I even know, even when you do a fast, if you're not careful, then you begin to come. If you don't have a direct end in mind for that, what happens is you begin to feel the guilt once you break that. And that was never meant to be the purpose, right? It was never meant to, I give all this up forever. It was, I give this up for a time for prayer. And so I do think that building that back as a Baptist, I think building that back into my year, whether it's 40 days or something, I do like the idea of a tithe, but maybe that's something we even spread out. I don't really necessarily care about the tradition, but you're saying it's been a long part of the church history for a long time, though.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely has. And again, you can enter at different levels if you decided that you want. One of the things that I don't like is this kind of modern, and it's not really just Protestant, it's more just modern view of, for 40 days, I'll just give something randomly up, like TV or something. Or I'm just going to do more evangelism or do more Bible reading. And so it's just an idea that I'm going to commit to something for 40 days. That's really loose, and it's better than nothing. So don't get me wrong. But, fasting is fasting. And I hear people all the time say, I can't fast. I've got blood sugar issues. I've got all kinds of things. Well, that's fine. And maybe you can give something up if you've got a particular reason you can't fast. But I think we need to challenge some of us, fasting is part of the deal. Jesus said, my disciples, you will fast. You just don't have to fast right now. And so, that's a Christian discipline that I think we do need to talk about. But
I'm going to make a note, man, because that's a huge one. I think between some of these feasts and celebration videos, we do need to talk about the need for fasting, because I think it's a long lost. Yeah. The use of it is long lost, and we don't talk about it because we don't want to give things up. I don't want to give up cheesecake and Coke.
And it was a long-standing reality. And the first person I heard share this was Jeff Orge. He's the president at Gateway Seminary. When I was taking preaching from him, he said that if you ever just wanted to get mastery over an area in your life, think about fasting. And it always stuck with me because that's the first time I'd ever been challenged to fast. But if you read Thomas Aquinas and you read long-standing ethics and moral teaching, part of the thing that fasting accomplishes is it helps you gain mastery of your body. Paul talks about, buffeting his body, that there's a word called concupiscence. And this is the idea of what's left. After we have been saved and redeemed and washed, we still have an inclination to sin. And those typically are physical lusts. They can be sexual lusts. They can be just food, right? And part of the way that you gain mastery over those areas is by choosing to give them up and then focus on the Spirit. And it is a long lost art, but I'm always amazed at how many church members in my church are doing it. They just don't tell anybody they're doing it, but they read the Bible and they know we're supposed to be doing it. And part of what I like about Lent and Advent, because there's an Advent fast too, is that we do it together. So it's not something that we're showing everybody and showing off, but if you know that you're in it together with somebody, you're more inclined to actually fulfill your goal and stick with it. So.
Yeah, well, I think we're getting to a point where this is a good way to kind of round this first one off. I think there's a way, in my opinion, like if I'm looking at my own church, Andrew, I think there's a way to say for our people, like, hey, this is something to consider. I think it should be real. I think you need to probably look into real biblical fasting as your guidelines for how you do it. But I do think there's something valuable in also kind of going, because it's not an obscure, Lent is not an obscure piece of church history, right? It's there, and a majority of the world at least the Christian world is celebrating this. And I think it's important, I think, to build that in if you don't already have an idea of how to fast and all of that. In my opinion, I think for my people, I would say, yeah, go for it. If you want to, go for it. Let that be something you want to do. But I also think that, just have a grasp of how to fast as you do it. And don't let this become legalistic as you go through it.
And I would say, if you want to get into this, say it's your first year, and you're like, I want to actually try it. I would suggest do the 3-day approach, which would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Don't eat meat. Fish is usually okay if you need something, and try to hold that through the whole 40 days. And then, if there is another level, maybe give up animal products or cheese or something for the whole 40 days. Find something that you can give up all the time. But that would be an easy entry point. And then you can kind of stack it up. You could then do I'm not going to eat till 3 p.m., maybe just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or you can kind of build into this. But you know that your starting time is Wednesday the 17th, and this ends the Saturday night before Easter. And then Easter is a party. It's a celebration.
Yeah.
And those eggs might mean a little bit more. You might actually want real eggs, not just chocolate eggs. So I think that'd be a good way to kind of enter in. And I might do a little bit on my devotion about how I intend to do this, because I'm thinking through. I did the Advent fast, and it was very similar to that. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I just didn't eat for 24 hours. And it was challenging. I'll tell you, I definitely wanted to eat, and not every day was spiritual, but something about doing that is helpful to, again, I was trying to remember when I'm hungry, you pray it to the Lord. And so there's value there. And so again, it's worth considering. It's not legalistic. And that's kind of what I've got to say about it, I guess.
Hey, man, I think that's a good place to be, and a good place to stop. I think that the blessing is too, if you start this, this is not something that the Lord is going to be upset if you can't do it, right? Not that I think there's value. Try it, right? But I think if you fail because you've never done fasting before, and now you're jumping in and you realize oh crud, I don't know. I think it's a good place. It needs to be fasting in general, not necessarily the 40 days, but fasting in general should be a part of our life as Christians. And so just recognize because of the gospel, God sees you through the lens of Christ. You're covered in his record, and not whether you have been able to hold to your fast for the 40 days. So when you do break down and you couldn't help yourself, that's okay. It's a good discipline though to work in. So I'm cool with it too. And I think that it could be a valuable tool for our churches to to implement, to maybe have a Baptist kind of, form of it, or at least, some sort of a form that not necessarily goes through all the rules, but at least some guidelines for fasting during this period with the rest of kind of the church world.
Well, cool. Well, you want to close this out with the blessing?
Let's do it, man. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And may the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor upon you and give you peace. All right, man. Thanks for chatting with me about Lent. Next one that will come up, Purim. So take care. Talk to you guys later.
All right.